Nearly 60 years.
This is the most important
This is Milwaukee's Voice.
and a sound blueprint.
860 AM and 106.5 FM. WNOV. The views and opinions expressed on this show do not reflect that of the staff and management of WNOV and W293 CX 106.5 FM Courier Communications Milwaukee, but are the sole comments of the host and guest of this particular show.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Money Talks with Attorney Coral. I am Attorney Coral Plus, the host of the show, and I thank you for joining me this morning. The Money Talks show is sponsored by Columbia Savings and Loan Association. Special shout out and thank you to Columbia Savings and Loan for sponsoring this show on a weekly basis. So, while we're talking about Columbia, I always like to remind everyone we are at 2020 West Fond du Lac Avenue in Milwaukee. That is 2020 West Fond du Lac Avenue. Come on in to Columbia Savings and Loan and open a savings account. Open a savings account for your son or daughter. Open a savings account for your grandchild. Just stop in and open an account with Columbia Savings and Loan. If you have an interest in applying for a mortgage loan, please come to Columbia. Give us a call at 414-374-0486. That is 414-374-0486. Call and schedule an appointment to meet with someone on our loan team so that they can assist you. We look forward to hearing from you at Columbia with your banking needs and your mortgage needs. So today, I am going to talk about financial literacy. This is a topic that I began a few weeks ago, but we had so many callers that were interested in calling in on this topic that I didn't even get a third of the way through the materials that I had planned to present. So I'll take that as a good sign and say that that's good because I know that that means that people are listening. That you have questions, that's fine. We look forward to hearing from you. Or if you have comments or anything you'd like to share or add to the discussion. What I'm providing here today is informational, hopefully educational, but I'm open to comments or questions from the public sphere as well. Um, I taught a class on financial literacy and budgeting a few years ago. So the comments that I will offer today really are based on an outline that a class that I taught for. Basically, it was an organization that was promoting homeownership and um, recruiting people to take certain coursework in financial literacy and budgeting so that they could qualify for some down payment assistance on a potential home purchase. So that's where this information derives from that I'd like to offer here today. So again, I would like to invite the audience to call in if there's anything you'd like to add to the conversation. So starting off very basic, what is financial literacy? People hear that term thrown around, and I just have learned over the years that it's sometimes good to just take a step back and define the terms that we use on a regular basis, and everybody just kind of assumes or we think that we know what things are, but it's always good to get back to the real basics and just give some definitions out there. So, what is financial literacy? Financial literacy is the ability to understand and use financial skills and concepts. It includes skills like personal finance management, like budgeting, or even investing. That's not something that we're going to get too much in to today, but I am going to focus on the financial literacy component and budgeting. Um, but it also um, can involve understanding financial principles like managing your debt or something like financial planning. Financial literacy can help people avoid making poor financial decisions and to achieve financial stability. So, what are some of the main concepts of financial literacy? Well, budgeting, I mentioned that, and we'll go into more detail about that a little bit later in the show today. Saving, which is why I started off the show saying, hey, come and open a savings account with Columbia. Debt management, credit, which is something that always warrants its own separate show. I've done several shows on the topic of credit, and I'll be doing more in the weeks and hopefully months to come because that's something that never gets old. And it's something that every person needs to have a very basic, at least, understanding of. And there's others, but these are the basics that we'll talk about for today. So, what is the golden rule of financial literacy? Basically, you spend less than you make. That's the main point of understanding. Now, this might seem like something that's obvious, but spending less than you make is by far the biggest key to financial success. If you struggle with spending, focus on this one rule until you're at a point where you have a positive cash flow at the end of the month. So, you may say, okay, well, that sounds easy enough, but how do I implement that? How do I take that and actually put that into practice? Well, one thing that you have to do is just kind of sit back and self assess, right? And really ask yourself the tough questions. Um, you ask yourself, am I making unnecessary financial commitments, such as, let's say, for instance, credit card debt? Is that credit card debt really necessary? Or were you shopping for things that were not necessities, but maybe a want rather than a need, right? Um, Another that may be an unnecessary financial commitment. And notice I said maybe, right? Everyone has to decide for themselves whether something is necessary for your situation or if you could scale back and scale down that cost. What I was going to mention is car loans, student loan debt, or maybe even mortgages. It just depends on the type of home that you're in. So, if you find yourself living beyond your means, it is important to try to take action. So, there are a few ways that you can combat overspending and living beyond your means. First, you need to get comfortable with your finances and track your spending. Now, that's again one of these things that's more easily said than done. But in this modern day, most of us use some sort of bank card or some sort of an app to pay for things. It's rare, like nobody writes checks anymore, right? I mean, I don't know. When's the last time you guys wrote a check? Jermaine, when's the last time you wrote a check?
Years. It's been years since I
Hmm.
wrote a check. Because I mean, everything now is right at your fingertips.
Right.
So everything is electronically now. So yeah, I haven't wrote a check in years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't write very many, that's for sure. And it always kind of, I don't know, it's usually many months in between. I'll have a checkbook and it lasts forever because I'll look at it. Let's say if I have to write a check for, usually it's something like paying for the landscaping services at home or something like that. Um and for whatever reason that particular company still um, sends well, they send the invoice by email, but they don't have it set up where you can just go online and pay. And, it's actually something that I have recommended to the owner of the business because you'll get paid quicker. People will just click on it and go ahead and sync a card or whatever they're going to do, debit an account and, set it to default that you can make sure that you can receive payments in that way. I even do that with the law firm. We're able to receive payments through an online portal, but it's always more tedious to have to print out this invoice and then go figure out where I even keep the checkbook because it's so few and far between that I use it. Honestly, I forget where it is sometimes. At home, I'm talking about at home. I'm not talking about business. But then I have to go find it and dig it out and sit there and write a check and find an envelope and, find a stamp and, address it and do all of that. So it's kind of a tedious thing. I got a little off topic, but I was just thinking about that. Like, who writes checks anymore? Harvey, does anybody in your generation even know what a checkbook is?
I mean, I do, but I never wrote a check.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not surprised to hear you say that. So, because I have a niece that's about your age, and just you look at her and you say checkbook, and her eyes get wide. She knows what it is, but at the same time, that's not even a function.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is certainly something. Let's say, for instance, with my mom's generation, they lived by their checkbooks and their logs, and that's how they manage things. So I don't want to take away from that. If that's what it takes to keep you organized so that you know what's going and what's coming, and let's say if you have one of those little carbon receipts behind the check so that you'll know what check you wrote, or if you're diligent enough to make a note of it, if that's how you keep your affairs organized, please continue. But otherwise, if you are online, then that information is at your fingertips. You just, go into whatever app it is you're using, and you're able to pull up your transactions, and you're able to track things in that way. So I find, really, as I'm saying all of this, that really what I'm getting at is organization. It's just so important to be organized in order to do anything. That is what helps me to do so many things, is because I am extremely organized in how I keep records and that sort of thing. So get comfortable with your finances and track your spending. This will help you see where your money is going and where it may be overspent, right? And ultimately, that'll help you to determine if your issue is a spending issue, or if you're not making enough money to support your lifestyle. So um, another component, in terms of, we were talking about some financial weaknesses, and I had mentioned overspending or living beyond your means. Another financial weakness is not having an emergency fund. Um, an emergency fund is a savings account where you put money for unplanned events, such as a car accident, a sudden medical emergency, or, where I see it a lot is if somebody's car breaks down, because that's the sort of thing that can catch you off guard. And a car, depending upon where you live and where you work, can, really can be a necessity. So it's one of these things that most of us need to have. And if you are driving along one day and your transmission goes out, and I know that that's an expensive repair, no matter what kind of car you're driving, it's good to know that if you have a savings account or some sort of cushion, some sort of an emergency fund, that if something like that happens, it won't set you back. I've had a circumstance. I don't remember who I was talking to recently, but they were telling me, and this was a business owner, a small business owner, and what she was telling me is that she had a young lady who worked for her, that was, coming along, doing well, had been there for a couple of months, was learning her tasks and so forth, and she was looking forward to growing and developing this person. But the young lady quit her job, and it was a very abrupt um, um, decision, and she couldn't understand why. So she said, "Well, my car broke down, and I can't afford the repairs, so I don't have a way to get to work. Therefore, I have to quit my job." And all right, that is some circular logic that probably isn't good, right? Because if she would be able to keep her job, then she might be able to, well, she certainly can earn, right, if she keeps her job, but she might be able to start saving so that if something were to happen where she needed emergency money, that she'd be able to do something such as pay for a repair on her car. But um, and I think this was someone who lived at home with parents still, so she didn't have the pressure of worrying about paying rent or paying a mortgage or those sorts of things. But she couldn't get her car going, so she quit her job. So, that's the type of in my opinion, unproductive thinking that we need to get away from. That no, you don't quit your job because your car broke down and you can't get to work. That's when you call your job and you try to get overtime. You try to get more hours, or you take on another job if you're able to, and try to work harder to push yourself ahead. That's not the time to wave the flag and give up. But you know, we've got to instill these types of values in our young people so that they know and can make better decisions in a situation like that. So, having an emergency fund is important for your financial security, and that you don't let the trials of life or anything that goes wrong just, drag you under to where you walk away from a good paying job. When if money is the object and that's what you need, you don't get anywhere by not working. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have an emergency fund, but try to prioritize building one. Um, how do you go about doing that? Well, if you're not tracking your expenses or your spending, let me say it that way. If you're not tracking your spending, please start. This will help you see where your money is going. You can then use that information to determine where you can cut back and put that money towards your emergency fund. Oh, so for example, if you're spending money on, let's say, something like subscriptions, like for streaming services, a lot of times you're not even using those services. Now, I'll admit that I've got a couple of prescriptions, or excuse me, subscriptions. uh, sorry about that. Subscriptions for streaming services, but I use the ones that I have. I use, right. I try not to be wasteful with those things. I have a couple of them, so you got to enjoy some things in life. But a lot of times what ends up happening, they'll have a special, they'll advertise something, and then they'll say, "Oh, try us for 7 days free," right? And you say yes because there's one show you would like to watch. Well, you watch that one show, and the 7 days goes by and you forget to cancel that subscription. So they just keep hitting your account. Right? You've gone on with life and you're not even thinking anything of it. But it adds up. Do that enough times and it adds up. It could be hundreds of dollars a month. Go ahead, Jermaine.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what companies really bank on. They bank on you to forget. They want you to forget.
Mm-hmm.
So, with life going on and everything that's happening, they want you to forget about these little subscriptions that you signed up for so they can keep hitting you. And then after, when you realize you've paid like $200-300 over something you really don't need,
Right.
it's too late because they already got the money out of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just, for instance, one. What if you
Yeah.
have 3 or
Multiple,
4 or
yeah.
5 of them?
Yeah.
So if ever I subscribe to something for a 7-day free trial and I know there's only one thing I want to watch, I'll put a calendar reminder in my phone when it's time to, end that subscription so that doesn't happen. So that's just a little tidbit, but I do see we have a caller holding. So caller, please go ahead.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Tyrone W.
Yes, sweetheart. Yes. All right, my sweetheart.
How are you today?
Blessed, joyful, grateful, thankful to the Lord. And I'm just kind of doing a few things here with the President Carter up at the Rotunda in Washington there. So I kind of came in a few minutes late.
Mm-hmm.
So forgive me for that. But I hear you talking about the The check. Well, first of all, Jermaine and brother man Carvey. What's up, man Carvey?
Hey,
Jermaine,
man. How you doing, man?
yes, blessed, joyful, grateful, thankful to the Lord.
Yes, sir.
Milwaukee, yes, Tyrone W. speaking. Um, and prayers out to the Carter family. Yeah, I was actually in service. I was actually, that's when I did my military time when he was the president. So I was born. I was born when Kennedy came in '58, and then I served in the military when Carter was in. So other than that, I've been a civilian with all the other rotten fellas here, Reagan and all the other rotten batch of rot that we just plain old rotten with the rest of them. Oh boy! But anyway, I want to swing kind of wide here, but you're right. And what Jermaine had said about and you as well with the subscriptions and all that, and then the emergency fund. Help me find a word, please, if you can, dear heart. I mean, my heart goes out to the California people here, and the fellow, I forget his name here, but he was on there with you, and we talked about share stocks and insurance. Now these companies out here done canceled.
That was Damon Dorsey.
Dorsey, right? Yeah, right. You have to bring him back again because now there's got and remember the question I asked you about Barada. Is there a committee or somebody that can keep him from running the monopoly on the market there? But now the same thing here goes to the insurance. I mean, here these people here. The one young lady said that her parents were in their 90s. And they paid all this money to this insurance company, and they done canceled. Now that the fire is here, well, no, everything that you paid into, we're not going to pay you. To me, that's thievery. That's straight up thievery. That's fraud, thievery, breach of contract. Help me find another word.
Bad faith.
The BS is so thick. I need. The fishing boots I need to put on need to be up to my shoulders, man. It's got to be somebody to say, look here, the regulators, whoever saying you're stealing people's money and you're not standing by what you're saying you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's breach of contract. That's fraud. That's straight up theft. You lying to people. Something ain't right somewhere, and this is why you get people who go postal and stuff like Mr. Pharrell not say, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep sucking people's money out of them.
Yeah.
I hear the music, but we're going to have to touch on this, between now and Super Bowl. We're going to have to hit this hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep putting, you're talking about emergency. I can't have no emergency fund because I'm putting money in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I don't understand, and maybe though you can help me because, a lot about this. If I pay into the insurance policy, and it's my money that I've paid into it, where's the money that I paid?
Right. Give me my money back that I paid you then. If it's $150,000, then give me that back then, But don't take my money and say you ain't gonna do nothing and then don't do nothing.
Well, and you're right about that because that's not how it is supposed to go. And I remember, Tyrone, I think it was one of the first times that you called in.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we're always talking about financial topics. We're always talking about money, but you tied it back all the way to the Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Right.
And you were saying the same thing then that, here's, look at what happened. People lost their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Things were burned down. Mm-hmm. And the insurance companies then just kind of said, oh, well, so they shrugged.
Yep, right. But I hear the music, so I'm going to get out the way. But between now and Super Bowl, I'll be back. We're going to hit this real hard. Okay?
All right. Appreciate your information.
So real quick, before you go to break, because I know you got to go to break, and maybe you can, answer this when you come back. Is there any kind of law that protects the customer from this type of chaos? Because for all those people out in California that lost their home and the insurance company saying that they're not going to cover, what are they going to do?
Yeah, now that is the question. So let's talk about that when we come back from the break. Thank you. Welcome back to Money Talks with Attorney Coral. I'm Attorney Coral Plus, and we were talking about financial literacy, and Tyrone W. called in and was raising some issues about insurance questions. And then I think right before we went to the break, Jermaine weighed in and said, well, what are people supposed to do? Like, if you have an insurance policy that you're paying into, and then a claim comes up that you need to make against that policy, how can they just not honor your claim? I'm just kind of paraphrasing the question, but that's the gist of what you were asking. So, first of all, an insurance policy is a contract. It's a contract between you and whatever insurance company you're contracting with. Yeah. And so most of them are multiple pages long because there are different terms that apply in that contract. So you're paying for what they promised to deliver in that contract.
And that's crazy, because if you pay on that insurance for years, you have some equity built up in that insurance, right?
Well, not exactly. It depends on the type of insurance. Okay. There are certain types of insurance where you build equity. Okay. That is not the typical. That's not the there's lots of different types of insurance. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Okay. So let's say, for instance, with what I deal with a lot in my practice is people that have insurance on their cars, right? So you're not building equity when you pay for the insurance premium on your car, because there's no possible way. Let's say you don't have an accident. Sometimes they'll kick you back a little. Hey, thank you for being a safe driver. Here's $500 discount for next year. But you can't go back and say, look, I paid $10,000 in over the last 3 years. I want my $10,000 back. It doesn't work that way. There's not equity that's building in an auto insurance policy. But what they're doing, you are saying, well, in case I have an accident, you guys got to be there and you got to cover me.
Right. So in this case, with the fires, with the money that you put into the insurance, you're pretty much saying, hey, if anything happened, I need you to be here for me.
Right.
But something has happened and they're not there. So now what?
Everybody that is affected by that needs to find a very good attorney in that state, wherever they are, right? Yeah. And make sure they get that policy in front of that attorney and get their legal guidance in terms of what to do. Because, for instance, if an insurance company has, let me make an affirmative statement. An insurance company has a duty to operate in good faith. So that's why when Tyrone was commenting and he said fraud, isn't this fraud or isn't that? He said, help me find another word, another phrase for this. And I said, bad faith. That's a legal term of art, right? People know what bad faith is on a layperson understanding basis, but say that in a legal basis, and it means something even more, because if you have a situation where an insurance company is operating in bad faith, and if you are able to establish that they've done that, in a court of law, it can entitle you to what the law refers to as punitive damages. And punitive damages means that it's above and beyond whatever is due you, but you get to punish them too for doing something wrong. So that's why I'm saying, and I'm not offering an opinion about what's going on in California, because I don't know enough of the specifics to offer any legal opinion on that. So I'm saying specifically what anybody who's affected by that needs to do is contact an attorney. Okay. I'm speaking just in general terms of how things work, but it looks like we do have a caller that's on hold. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, I think what we're overlooking here in this policy is that it's considered an act of God. You understand that?
Yeah.
So do you understand that if a tree, my neighbor's tree, fall on my house or my garage, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to sue the insurance company. Well, I would have to I could try to go after the insurance company, but the insurance is not going to cover it because it's an act of God. So I'd have to go after my insurance, and I still couldn't use it as the tree falling. I would have to claim property damage. You understand? It's the same way with having no flood insurance. and people basement get flooded out. First thing they do is call the insurance. I got flooded. I got flooded. No, 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 no. They're not finna cover that. But if you say property damage, I'm putting a claim towards my property damage. Then the insurance company looks at it a different way. But you're not gonna win against the act of God. I don't care who you is. I don't care how much money you done paid.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at the language, because I've been down this road before. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at the language. And most people, black and white, don't understand the verbiage, the language. And guess what?
Mhm.
They run in there and they say, if the fire caused, now if you could find out if the fire was not caused naturally, okay, but once the wind pick it up, then it becomes a natural disaster, because you can hit a hammer on the ground and a spark get in some dry shrub and cause a fire. And then once the wind takes off, then it becomes a natural thing. But in the root of it, it started with somebody flipped the cigarette out the road going down the road, or somebody. It could be a muffler dragging the ground in a dry area, and a spark that don't look like it'll cause nothing will get over in some dry brush and start swirling there, and before you know it, you got a blaze on your hand. But that's what I want to say.
No, that's really, really helpful. But Jermaine, did you have another question that you wanted while we have the caller?
I just wanted to ask. So, if it's not considered act of God, then how do you go about that? Because I think I'm not sure, so I want to be careful of how I word this. But I believe in California, this fire was started by a human. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna have to check it. I believe.
We'll check that out. But listen, once the wind picks it up,
right,
then it becomes a natural wildfire. See, the same wind can be as gentle enough to blow a candle out on a birthday cake. Mm-hmm. That same wind can pick up and do what it's doing right now.
So,
start a hurricane, or start a tornado.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the source, and then that becomes sticky. But when it comes down to an insurance policy, see the policy, what we talking about,
right?
The policy, they gonna scream act of God. They into saving money, man. It's business.
Right.
Okay?
So question is, so even if they find out what the cause is and find that it's not caused from like lightning strikes or anything like that, then the insurance company still won't cover?
Well, that's a gray area. I'm not a insurance underwriter or lawyer, but I would say one thing, Jermaine, that it's a sticky situation. See, because you can find out that it's caused by a human, but once nature grabs a hold of it, it's out that backyard.
Okay.
You see, it's out that backyard. Now, I have seen them prosecute people for starting a fire, though.
Yeah.
You can get prosecuted for that, man.
Yeah.
You can get prosecuted for out there hammering in a bad area, and you don't report it, and you run off, and you know it's over there, or you could do it unintentionally. It can happen unintentionally. I've seen people be prosecuted for that, and they didn't know they started the fire. They flipped the cigarette out the window or did something, and they've been prosecuted for it. And at that particular point, I mean, your lawyers, your attorneys would have something to stand on, but at the same time, once nature get a hold to that thing, man, it's in God's hand.
Oh,
yeah, it's in God's hand. But anyway, I thought I would chime in on that, because your neighbor's tree can fall down on your house, and guess what? You can call your insurance company and tell them a tree fell down on my house, and they're not going to cover it like that because it's an act of God. But what you can do, the property damage. There's a clause in your policy for your property, and you get that you get faded like that. Same way with that doggone flood in your basement. Most people call in, my basement been flooded. They saying the wrong stuff. The people gonna say you didn't even have flood insurance. Let me get out of here, man.
Yeah, but we appreciate your information. Thank you so much for calling. So yeah, I think the moral of the discussion or the story is that, the issues are complicated. It's nuanced. It's driven on facts, depending upon what happened. So the best thing, I've said it maybe twice already, but it's worth saying again, the thing to do is to contact an attorney in your area and make sure that they are reviewing the contract. Because as the caller said, and I said moments before, that contract dictates what they must pay and what they don't have to pay. So
Yeah.
that's the way it works.
Well, I just received a text from a listener that's listening to the show,
Hmm.
and they said, "Not true. If it's an act of God, your insurance pays for even if the heat or rainstorm roofing." So I don't know how true that is, but that's
Hmm.
what a listener just texted me, and so I'm gonna look at it, and
Yeah.
look into it, and see it. But I was just questioning that because I just
Hmm.
don't understand how there's no laws against these insurance companies that's
Hmm.
doing this stuff to people. Like, people are working hard and
Hmm.
they are already struggling.
Hmm.
So, and you're trying to do the right thing.
By
So,
having insurance,
yeah, trying to do
right?
the right thing, and you
Right.
just getting
But
it's
that's where the language of that contracts comes into effect.
yeah.
So
Verbiage is very important.
verbiage is
Yeah,
very important.
yeah.
It's important to know what's in the policies. It's important to know what covers you and what doesn't cover you. I'll tell you, and again, I know we're a little off topic, but it's worth talking about this stuff a little bit. One thing that I see in my practice that can be really hard to see is if let me give you like an example. It's a better way to explain. So I had a young lady who early 20s, expecting her first child, and she was driving, trying to go to work. Um, and she ended up getting T-boned hard on the driver's side by another car, and the injuries were severe. She broke her pelvic bone, and they were concerned about the pregnancy. Yes, she wasn't I want to say maybe 7.5 months along. So she was fairly far along, but they ended up having to take the baby earlier, because of the trauma of her injuries, and everything. And um, it was just a tragic situation all around. But it turned out that there were a couple of young men in the car that hit her, a young teenager that was driving. And once the impact of the collision happened, and this was right here in Milwaukee, the kids jumped out of the car and took off running. So off they went, right? So here she is, injured to the point where they had to take her to Frederick and hospitalize her, fight to save her baby, and the pain of having a fractured pelvis. I'm fortunate. I've never broken any bone, but imagine that bone, because whatever you do, if you're sitting, if you're walking, if you're what can you do to get comfortable if you have a fractured pelvis? That's a very tough injury. Um, and then, like I said, they had to take her baby early. And fortunately, the baby was healthy, but still, just the fear of all of that while this was unfolding. So relate that to the topic of insurance. Well, it turns out that the car that hit her had been stolen by the young men who took off running. I say young men, but they were kids. They were 14, 15, years old probably. That's just based on her description of how young they appeared, because they took off, and I don't know if they ever found them or not. But she did not have insurance coverage on her car either. So when this stolen car hit her, the owner of that car had insurance, right? The owner of that car paid their insurance on a monthly basis. So the car had full coverage. However, there is a clause in that contract that says if there is non-permissive use of this vehicle,
They won't cover.
we won't cover. So since that car was stolen and it got in an accident, the insurance company was not obligated to pay.
So that's the loopholes in all these contracts.
Well, we call it that, but it's the terms of the contract. That's what I'll refer to it as from a legal basis. So, yep. Looks like we have another caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hey, listen, I just called in, and I'm sorry to be a double dipper, but somebody called in and challenged what I was saying. And I'm the kind of guy that can say almost anything and somebody will come after me and,
Mhm.
and they really don't know. But I want to read this because I've been through this. See, some
Yeah.
people are just
Yeah, you
listen to
said
this.
you were
Yeah.
speaking from
Yeah.
experience, so I sure didn't doubt it. But no, go ahead and read it to us.
I can tell those same people that ISIS is in their backyard right now and to call the national guard, call some authorities, and they wouldn't believe me. They'll go look out the window first. Listen to this. And after that, and you know what? They make themselves look bad most of the time challenging Brother Meeks. Check this out. I had to pull this up. An act of God is an inconsolable event, such as a tornado, flood, or such. Okay, caused by not caused by humans. Insurance companies often limit or exclude coverage for acts of God.
Yeah.
Acts of God do not dissolve people from a duty to exercise responsible care. Okay, policyholders should review their policies for coverage and excludes. I mean, and exclusions. Okay, to acts of God in the U.S. Flood insurance is offered by the National Flood Insurance Program. See, you have to understand that. And when you got people that call in just to dispute me, probably because of my political affiliations, which I do more for the black community than they probably do sitting on their truffle duck, their do nothings. Okay, but I want you to understand something. Look at that policy, just like you said. And sometimes they offer you stuff like earthquakes and all that. And the first thing your insurance agency says, you don't have to worry about that because we don't have earthquakes and none of that and all of this and all that, bombings and all that. That'll probably never take place. So to get a people policy, most people just jump over that clause in the clause, okay? But the person that called in an act of God, let them fall on his house and let him go in there and talk about it. And he'll say that little nigga was right. Okay, I'm out.
Okay, thank you, caller. We appreciate that. Yeah, and it just goes back to what we are saying that you got to go back to the contract. The contract sets forth the terms, and not every insurance contract is identical. There's different companies that maybe cover things that other companies don't. Like for instance, I know that there was an insurance company that would cover punitive damages in their contracts. So let's say, for instance, and again, so much of my practice relates to auto policies. So I'm, um, can talk about that with examples that bring it to life and make it make sense for people. So let's say there's a person who, and this was a factual case that I had some years ago, a person who was rear ended by a drunk driver and the injuries were severe. It wasn't just a whiplash injury because that's common from a rear end collision. But for whatever reason, the force of the impact was enough so that this person ended up requiring a cervical fusion surgery to correct the spinal injury that they suffered as a result of this rear end. Well, as it turned out, unfortunately, the person who was driving the car that did the rear ending, so in other words, the negligent party, um, when the police were called and that person had a blood alcohol level that was way over the legal limit. And it turned out then if a person, so it's not just negligence, right? When you have a situation like that and someone rear ends you, if that this was again like I mentioned some years ago, but um the way that it worked was that that person that did the rear ending um was not only accused of negligence, they were accused of behavior that warranted punitive damages. So in other words, we don't have to just pay you what you're due from these injuries and the pain and suffering. There needs to be a punitive, like a punishment attached to this because the behavior was just so egregious that they caused this accident by getting out there operating a vehicle while under the influence of alcohol. So there was an insurance company, and I I don't even want to say the name because I don't know if they still have this clause in their policy or not. But there was a big national insurance company that had as part of their contract that they would cover punitive damages. So if you happen to get rear-ended by a drunk driver that happened to be insured by this company, you not only were able to recover your actual damages, but punitive damages on top of that. Now, I don't know if that company still has that in their policy or not. They probably have pulled it out now. A lot of companies had pulled it out even already back then. That look, we'll pay for the damages that we're liable for based on negligence. But if you start getting into punitive damages because you were out there driving under the influence and causing severe bodily harm to people, then, we don't want to pay for that. So they would include language in their policies that would allow them to not have to be accountable for those damages. So the one thing I did want to say, though, back to the example of the young lady that was pregnant when she was T-boned by the stolen vehicle, that I wish she had had insurance on her car, because had she had insurance on her car, we could have made a claim against her own policy. So at least she would have had something coming. She got zeroed out in this, unfortunately, because there just wasn't anywhere to go to look for the coverage. But okay, it looks like we have to take a break. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more Money Talks with Attorney Coral. Talks with Attorney Coral. Thank everyone for listening. We planned to talk about financial literacy today, and all of this is relatable to financial literacy. The one thing that I won't get into today that I planned was to talk about budgeting, because I think that warrants its own show. I don't want to try to cram it in here at the end. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the insurance topics and finish what I was saying about the young lady who was expecting and got T-boned by the the drivers that ran away because it was a stolen vehicle. And so I was saying right before the break that I wish she had had her own policy of insurance. So that relates to our financial topic today, because one of the things that we should consider in the quest for financial literacy is paying for auto insurance. And I know it's expensive. I know everything is expensive nowadays, but a situation like hers, and it was just so unexpected what happened. Now, granted, she had health insurance coverage so that the medical bills were taken care of. So all of that part was addressed. But, it was terrible to see this young woman in this situation that was not of her own making. Um, and not be able to recover any damages for the pain and suffering that she endured and the struggle that ensued in her life, because she was laid up for quite a while and unable to work. So it was a terrible time. Now, thankfully, she had family that was able to kind of help her and catch her when she fell in this situation. But imagine if she hadn't had that. She could have ended up homeless with a new baby in this situation. So I encourage people to get insurance on your own vehicle, so that if some uninsured driver hits you, and that's essentially what this ended up being, because if there's a policy there, but they're not required to pay, that is an uninsured incident. So you can make a claim against your own policy in a situation like that in order to recover something. So people say, well, why should I have to make a claim against my policy? Well, that's what you pay for. You pay that premium, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually, semi-annual, however you pay it. You're paying a premium so that in case something happens to you, that you will be able to rely on that insurance company to pay for whatever you are contractually entitled to in your damages. So don't look at it like, I don't understand when people say that. And the way I explained it to a gentleman a week or two ago that I was talking to, and that means, oh my goodness, I'm talking severe injuries. This particular person is paralyzed from the neck down. Okay, and we don't know that he'll ever be any more well off than that. They haven't even been able to come in and do physical therapy with him, because every time he gets well enough to try, pneumonia sets back in and he's set back again and not able to even do physical therapy. And I said to him, it was a terrible accident. And again, this was another one that he was hit by some young people. Now they did catch up with those two and they're being prosecuted criminally. But that's not really solace to somebody who's never going to be able to move their arms and legs again. Um, but he did not want to make a claim against his own policy. He didn't sustain any head injury in this accident, so he's able to communicate with me. But I just said to him, why are you trying to protect the multi-million or multi-billion dollar corporation? You paid them every month in order to have a policy. Don't stand here and tell me that, I don't want to make a claim against, why should my insurance have to pay? That's what you paid for, and now you need it. Therefore, we need to go grab this policy so that you can pay to have somebody come in here and give you round the clock assistance that you're going to need for the rest of your time. So anyway, that sort of thing is so important. Now, here's another thing. How much time do I have, Jermaine? Because, all right. So I want to just quickly talk about one other case where, again, this was a young person who was a passenger in a vehicle that was uninsured. Her friend was driving. They hit a pole. The passenger ended up with a fractured occipital lobe and permanent damage to one of her eyes. It wasn't a total loss of vision, but it was vision, excuse me, but it was substantial loss of vision. And she thought that there was nothing that could be done. She was in a car that had no insurance. Well, this was a young person. She was only 16 years old. So the first thing I asked her, by the time she came to me, she was, 18. But I asked her, well, who did you live with when you were 16 years old? She lived with her mom. And I said, did your mom have a car? Yes. Did your mom's car have insurance? Yes. All right, I need to talk to your mom. I need to get that policy because, again, you go all the way back to the contract. You look at the terms of the document and see what it says. And that particular contract did have uninsured motorist coverage. So people say, well, wait a minute. The mom wasn't involved in the accident. The mom's car was not involved in the accident. Well, it didn't have to be, because if you look at the terms of the contract, it describes an insured person as being anyone who was a resident of the household at that time. This 16-year-old daughter was a resident of her mom's household. That entitled her to make a claim against that policy, even though that car and that insurance was in no way connected with the accident that happened. So this is why my mantra for the day is, if you have a situation where there is an insurance, potential insurance claim, you need to talk with an attorney. You need to have someone review that contract with you. If you think there's no coverage, there might be coverage. And if you think there's coverage, it's possible, if there's a situation based on the facts, that an argument can be made to cover you. Don't just take it and say, well, there's nothing I can do. At least consult with someone is what I'm saying. So, okay, we got a little off task with the topic of budgets, but the insurance discussion is always an interesting one as far as I'm concerned. So I'm glad to have had the time to talk about that a little bit here today. And I think we should talk about it maybe a little bit more, even so in the future. Jermaine, you raised some excellent questions. I thank the callers that contributed today. And yeah, we're looking forward to being back next week with more Money Talks with Attorney Coral. Don't forget to call Columbia Savings and Loan Association at 414-374-0486 to apply for a mortgage, or stop in at 2020 West Fond du Lac Avenue and open a savings account so we can save for a rainy day. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with more.